time for our keynote speaker. Before I introduce him, I would like to thank our partner who helped bring this to fruition. That is the Honeywell Building Technologies. They are the sponsors of this opening keynote. I ask you to please pay attention to a very brief video done by Honeywell.
At Honeywell, we believe the future is what we make it, and it starts with a healthier school. Provide facilities that are measurably safer, share real-time information to show they're safer, and use straightforward analytics to keep schools safer. With informed decisions and rapid responses, these are the integrated capabilities our customers have always trusted, and we know how critical it is to get this balance right. From protective masks to intelligent building automation, a healthier school helps you optimize facilities for safety, learning, and compliance. Clean the air as students come and go. Clean surfaces between classes. Pre-screen body temperatures. Monitor social distancing. And use Honeywell Forge Analytics to sustain compliance. Schools can still bring students and teachers together in greater safety. And that's Honeywell's commitment to your school. Make it safer, show it safer, keep it safer tomorrow.
Thank you again to Honeywell. For those that know me well, know that I am an avid Disney fan. I've been since I can remember, and over the course of my lifetime, I've had the pleasure of visiting the Magic Kingdom many, many, many times. And for me, it's a magical, magical place, to say the least. What you might not know about me and my district is that Bob Iger, I don't know if that name rings a bell to you, but Bob Iger was the recently retired CEO of the Walt Disney Company. He wrote a book, The Ride of a Lifetime, and that was the title I chose for the theme of the September conference, if you recall. And I actually talked about how I sort of imagined the year being a bit of a roller coaster ride. It typically is, but I kind of expected we'd have even more of a roller coaster. As I said last night, I had no idea that we were actually going to be going on the cyclone, but we did, and we survived, and we came out together better for it. We didn't just survive, we thrived. But Bob Iger has a connection to Oceanside Schools. He is actually a graduate of the Oceanside School District. And in fact, his father was on the school board for 9 years. And if you get his book and read the beginning of it, he speaks about his summers cleaning the gum off the bottom of the desks in Oceanside Schools. And it's just a pretty wild thought to think that a man from Oceanside School District could ultimately wind up being the CEO of Walt Disney. But fast forward to this conference and the fact that, you know, finding a keynote speaker is probably one of the most challenging parts of this role, to be honest with you. It's hard to think of someone who might meet the needs of everyone and be really worth people's time and energies because you put so much into it coming to this conference. So the thought that I was able to find someone who was really a marriage between my love of Disney, my love of leadership, and wanting to find just the right person, I was so very lucky to have a friend and colleague who used to work not only as a principal in Orlando, but she also worked at the Magic Kingdom a couple of nights a week. It was her salvation, as she described it. But she introduced me to a man called Dan Cockrell, and he had just come out with his book, What is the Culture in Your Kingdom? That book will be available. I'll mention this again, but it is your gift, and he will sign it for you at a booth, at Utica booth. We'll mention that later, but it is your gift. But she introduced me to Dan, and from the day that she told me about him, I started to follow his podcast, and I absolutely, without a doubt, knew he would be the right person to bridge the gap for us between where we are and where we have been and where we need to go. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Dan Cockrell, former Vice President of Disney's Magic Kingdom.
Let it go, let it go, can't hold it back anymore. Let it go, let it go, turn it around.
How is everybody? Good. My wife has always told me, don't sing and don't dance. So I already broke one rule of public speaking. So thank you so much for having me today. As Phyllis had mentioned, this was meant to be. And I'm going to add a little bit to her story. I had the colleague she had mentioned, Lori Storch, had reached out to me after I left Disney and introduced herself. And she slid in there that Bob Iger was had attended the school she was a principal in. And so I said, oh, you have my attention. And so we talked for a while. And she said, well, I want to do a podcast. And I said, really? I said, for who? She said, I want to do a podcast about leadership, about innovation, creativity, magic, and send it out to my fellow teachers and my school and whoever's willing to listen to it. And I've learned in life, you always say yes. I've been taught to say yes. Yes, I'll do that. And so I'd already had a podcast going. So I had a friend of mine who ended up producing it for us. And we've done a handful of probably 10 podcasts. And I'm looking forward to get those going again. And so as time went on, that was 4 years ago, I think. 3 years ago, maybe. I'm losing track of time with everything that's going on. But here I am today. And I'll tell you, Phyllis is... she's a very nice lady, but she is strategic. Last night, she kept saying, your keynote's going to be so great. I can't wait to hear how magical it's going to be. And I kept feeling the pressure. She's being nice about it. But boy, I got to bed early and make sure I was ready for today. So a couple comments. I've just been so impressed with this conference setup. And I hate to always, it's kind of insulting to say pleasantly surprised, but I'll tell you, from the tech and audio to Teresa and her military precision of doing rehearsals. Does that make sense? Okay. I walked in yesterday for the rehearsal, and I said, where's Teresa? And they said, she's there. I said, I probably could have guessed that. She was in control of the room. But it's kind of intimidating when the teacher of the year is a better speaker than you are. So well done. That was very impressive. The other thing I want to mention, it was quite a flashback to see High School Musical being performed. When I was a general manager at the Magic Kingdom back in, 2006, 2007, that movie had come out. And we had a big group of college program arriving. So the general managers all got together to welcome them. And we decided to do High School Musical. Once again, don't sing, don't dance, Dan, because that's not your thing. And I said, I know, but I did it anyway. And watching them, it took me 3 months to learn a 30-second routine. So I don't know how long they've been rehearsing, but they probably have a lot more talent. So a little bit of background. I went to Boston University. I was a political science major, and I had no plans to do anything with that. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do with life. And my sophomore year at BU, I went down on the college program at Walt Disney World. And we have about 6,000 students rotating through when we're in full force, bringing college students in. They get college credit to study hospitality. And I did that first summer. I went back to school. And when I was about to graduate, I talked to my parents. It was May. No, it was Christmas. It was Christmas time. And they said, so what's the plan? I'm sure a lot of you have had this conversation. So what's the plan? You're not moving back in with us. And I said, well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I got plenty of time to figure it out. And they said, well, look, it's January and you're graduating in 6 months. You got to figure something out. And so I'd heard about this Disneyland Paris was going to open in January or April of 1992. And so I went back to Walt Disney World and interviewed and said, hey, I really enjoyed working here on the college program. I'd like to come back and work here, or maybe get to go to France. And they said, all right, well, we'll hire you. What would you like to do? And I said, well, what am I qualified to do? They said, you're qualified to park cars at Epcot. And I said, thank you, I'll take it. And so I was at Epcot for about 6 months, parking cars. And on January 1st, 92, I got on a plane and flew to France. I knew about 6 words of French, never opened a park, never been in a management role, but there I was going. And what do you think my first job was at Disneyland Paris? International parking. I'd done domestic, and I wanted to smooth out my resume, and so I wanted to get my international parking on there. And it turns out in France, you need twice as many people to park cars than you do in the United States. So cultural difference. Talk about culture. So we opened the park in April 92, And I'd moved in. I'd met this girl in Florida who was from France, and we now were dating. Then we moved in together, and my visa was going to expire in about 5 weeks, and we're doing the dishes one morning. And she says, so your visa is going to expire soon. I said, I know, I've been thinking about that, and I'm going to have to leave. And she said, well, what's your plan? What are you going to do? I said, well, I've been thinking about this, and I have a potential solution. Talk about creativity and innovation. I said, why don't we get married? And then that way I get my green card to stay. And she said, all right, that sounds good. She kept cleaned up the rest of the dishes. And then 4 or 5 weeks later, we got married. And 19 people at our wedding. And I'm hearing about that to this day. We lived in the most romantic city in the world. All the things we could have done, and I asked her to marry me and doing the dishes in the kitchen. But we got married and stayed over there for 5 years. And our son was born over there, and I did all kinds of different jobs. And then we moved to Florida in 1997 and spent the next 21 years at Walt Disney World. So 19 jobs in total, always looking for a new experience. I like to think that I always wanted to be a student. Unlike most of your students, I always wanted to be a student. I always wanted to be learning. And every time someone asked me, hey, Dan, you have a 4-year degree from Boston University. What are you going to do now? I'm going to Walt Disney World to park cars. And they said, what's that for? I said, I have a plan. And I did international parking. I have a plan. And then I worked in these jobs, and I had no plan. There was no plan. The plan was, let's just keep learning. Keep exposing yourself to new things. Keep trying new things, knowing that I was in an environment that I love being in. I love working with teams. I love working with people. I love solving problems. I love service, and that was inside me. And I luckily, early in my career, found a company that connected with. The company, the values of the Walt Disney Company, not all the values, but most of them connected with what I believed in. And when you're in an organization where you really believe the mission and the purpose, it's easy to do well because you don't have to change very much. You just have to work hard. And then back in 2017, our 3 of our kids, 2 were out of the house and 1 was on their way out. And my wife, Valerie, and actually she's watching the live stream right now from Colorado. And so she usually watches my keynotes and then critiques me afterwards. And so apparently she's going to get to do this remotely today. So I always get a lot of feedback on these. So she said, what's the plan? What are we doing next? And I said, well, we're going to have an early dinner, watch an episode of Breaking Bad. We'll go to sleep. That's what we always do. She said, you know what I mean. I said, well, I'm going to do what every Disney executive does. I'm going to retire from Disney, and then we'll go do something. And she said, no, we got to go. There's so much out there. We can go. Let's go do something else. And, as usually happens in our relationship, I put my foot down and said, absolutely not. And she sort of mumbled, we'll see about that. And a year later, I gave my notice. So it took her a year, though. It took a long time. But I was terrified. Because after being in an organization 26 years, going and doing something else it's unimaginable. And I didn't know what I knew. I didn't know if I could do anything else. But her attitude was, you know what, if this doesn't work out, if you fail, then you can just go get a job. I was like, you're being pretty cool about this. Usually I'm the one that's not worrying and it's vice versa. And I said, well, I don't want to go get another job. She said, well, then make this work. So that's been 4 years now, and we've been figuring out how to run a company, consulting, keynote speeches, workshops. She worked for Disney for 15 years, and so not only have we've been married for 28 years, but we now work closely together. And we've never really come, all the way close to where you could actually report attempted murder, but there's been some moments where it got kind of shifty there. But we figured this out. So today we're talking about the first big thing is culture. The book I wrote, How's the Culture in Your Kingdom, is what it's titled. And one of the big things when I started writing the book and figured out the title was, what is culture? And if you ask anyone what culture is, everyone has different definitions. They may look it up in the dictionary. But the best definition I heard about culture was, it's how things are done around here. That's what culture is. It's how things are done around here. So when you think about it, whether it's a business, it's your department, it's a school, it's your home, it's your church, it's your place of worship, wherever you go, there is a culture. And there's a certain way things are done. And sometimes that culture is strong. Everyone knows exactly how things are done. And you know kind of what the rules are and how things. And sometimes there are no rules. And, the culture sort of goes and meanders wherever it wants to go. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's bad. But the point is, you have to be very intentful on what culture you want to create. Don't let it happen randomly, because it may not go in the direction you want. 'Cause it'll be influenced by things you don't want it to be influenced by. And I would argue you all are culture makers. You're not in the classroom. You're not in the schools. You are there to create the environment, the culture for all of the people you're responsible for to operate. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do because you want to get in there and touch it yourself and be there yourself. But the way you have to do it is you pick the right people, you hire the right people, you train them, you communicate, you let them know what the expectations are, you reward and recognize performance when it's done well, and you coach when it needs to be corrected. And so as my wife Valerie likes to say, you go to Walt Disney World and you experience the magic. And I'll tell you, there is no magic. There is no magic. What is created is not done magically. It's done through discipline. It's done through empathy. It's done through understanding, learning, being vulnerable. And you just got to come back every day and go at it. So the culture in my house when our kids were growing up, the way things were done, we're at the dinner table. And there was no devices, no TV on, no devices, no iPad, no phones. You couldn't have a phone at the table. And that's the way things were done in our house. So for 30 minutes every night when the kids were smaller, before they had all these activities, that's the way things were done. When the friends came over, they realized, oh, no phones at the table. And that was how the place operated. So over time, and I'm going to talk about that today, how do you create that culture in your organizations, in your districts? And I know clearly that how you run a company and how you run a school district are different. And so today I'm not going to ask you to adopt what I'm saying, but I certainly will ask you to adapt it. Be creative and think about how you can take some of the concepts we're going to talk about and I'm going to present to you, and how would you put them in place in your jobs, in your schools? What processes are you going to change? What are you going to do differently that next week that you weren't doing today? And that's the key to everything. In fact, when I talked to Phyllis to prepare for this, I always like to talk to the clients multiple times to make sure I hone in and talk about exactly what they want me to talk about. Otherwise, I leave and they go, yeah, it was okay, but you didn't talk about what I wanted you to hit on. So we had lots of conversations, and she was very clear. Dan, I want you to inspire everybody, but I also want you to give them tools to go do something tomorrow. What can they actually do? Because what I've found, a lot of keynote presentations, everyone walks out high-fiving. Oh, that was great. You're gonna remember about 10% of what I said today. But everyone goes out high-fiving. This is great. And then Monday rolls around, and now you have emails, and now you have the phone ringing, and you have the parents calling, and you have the new mandate, and you have all these other things, and this becomes a distant memory. So the one thing I'm going to challenge you today is pick something. Pick one thing that I talk about today that you're going to try out when you go back, and just keep at it. That's going to be your little reminder, your little catalyst that you can change. Because that's really the only way things change. It's not how passionate you are. It's not how much you believe in what you're doing. It's what you do. The actions that you do is what really impacts people. Because that's the only way to show culture is the behavior. You have to demonstrate the behaviors in order to build a culture. And once again, I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Because what I realized in my career, when I was parking cars, I was just responsible for myself. I got to be on time. I got to make sure I have the right colored shoes on, the name tag on. I had to make sure I knew what I was doing. And then I got to a leadership role. Now I had a group of people I had to make sure were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And then when I became a general manager, I had a group of leaders that I had to lead to make sure they were doing what they were doing and making sure they were having the people reporting to them. And you can see where this is going. And at the point where I was the Magic Kingdom, I had 12,000 employees. And, it's like, well, how do you even control something like that? And I still am not quite sure how the Magic Kingdom runs. I think if no one showed up tomorrow, that place would open anyway, because it is a machine. And so you have to get to a point that you're not controlling anything. And I realized that when I got there. I'd had big jobs, but that was the biggest. And I said, I'm not controlling anything anymore, but I'm influencing everything. And if I can think about it that way, I start to get rid of all these silos and all these rules that I put in place. We create organizational structure to operate, but sometimes we don't think about, okay, what can I actually do? What can I actually go influence? What are the things I can get involved in? An analogy I like to use is, an elephant. When an elephant is a small calf at the circus, they put a collar around its leg and have a chain, and even if it pulls on it, it can't get away because it's too small and it can't escape. And then as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it has that same chain on its leg, and soon, you have a 2-ton elephant, but it doesn't realize that if it just walks away, it can pull anything right out of the ground. But it's in its mind, it's still stuck to that chain. It still can't go away. And that's a big thing I find with leadership, I find with innovation, creativity. We just don't realize what we're allowed to do, what influence we do have. And most of the time, you just got to ask. And I'm going to give you some stories today about people just stepping up and taking risks. But a lot of us are scared someone's going to say no, or we're going to be ridiculed, or not going to be respected, and so we don't try things. And I think that's a huge part of creativity and innovation, is getting your students to realize they can try to do things. And so the big thing is, if you really do believe in innovation, and believe me, I know you have a laundry list of other things, test scores, and all the things you need to deliver at school, and budgets, and the list of things that is going to hold you back from doing the things you want to do is long. But I tell you, every organization has that long list of things that's going to keep them back from being great, but they're great anyway because they focus and they decide that that's what they want to be. And if you all really do decide innovation is important, you will figure it out. But you got to do something differently, and you have to make that a priority, and you have to talk about it. And like I said, I'm going to go through some tactics for you today and take you through things you can actually do. My original list was 7. I had 1 through 7, and then I was sitting in the back, and I added 1A, and then I added a 0 at the very beginning, so I couldn't go below 1. But I want to talk about that first. So I guess we have really 9 items I'm going to get into today and talk about with you. I think the first one is the difference between creativity and innovation, because those often go together. I know the conference is innovation and imagination, but you could say imagination and creativity. Creativity and innovation, and those always are said as one word. And when I was working at Disney, I started to redefine what that meant, and after I left Disney, I really learned a lot about this topic. And where I concluded was creativity is just brainstorming. It's anything's possible. It's what if we could bring real reindeer into the school during Christmas? Okay, I can think of a lot of reasons that's not a good idea, but that's creativity. What if we could do this? So creativity is expansive thinking. And once again, this comes from design thinking. Expansive. You've heard that before. In brainstorming, there's no bad ideas. You just put it all out there and get it out there. That's creativity. Innovation is actually taking those creative ideas and figuring out if you can implement them to actually do something, to actually improve something. And that's where creativity is great, fun to do, but innovation has a purpose. And innovation is going to go ahead and move you forward. And so what I would challenge you all to do is just think about what's your common purpose? What is your mission every day? What are you supposed to be doing beyond responding and dealing with payroll and dealing with test scores and dealing with calendars and everything else? Well, the purpose is to educate children so they can have a better future. And it's easy to forget about that sometimes. But if you keep putting that purpose up there and keep reserving that, innovation becomes pretty obvious because you start fixing things that to make things better, to start improving things. But you have to pay attention. And paying attention is the biggest thing. And I, one of the hardest things about working 26 years at Disney is you stop seeing problems. You're just like, well, that's the way it is because we've always done it. And you hear that over and over again. Don't do things just because it's always done it. And you're like, look, I got too much stuff to worry about. I'm just going to keep doing it the way it's done because that's how we've always done it, and I don't have time to fix this. So you got to figure out the things that can be fixed and go ahead and take care of those. And I think other people think about, well, innovation has to be, you think of innovation, it's like NASA or Steve Jobs. You think of these big thinkers, and we always make it a bigger thing than it really needs to be. Innovation is just improving things, continuous improvement. It all goes in the same bucket. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples of things that I've experienced in my career. One is, has anyone ever here parked at the Magic Kingdom or parked in a Walt Disney World parking lot? Okay. Has anyone here parked in a parking lot bigger than a parking lot at Walt Disney World? Okay, maybe not. Maybe a sports stadium. They're big parking lots. And when people get in the morning, so 12,000 is the number again. That's a popular number. We have 12,000 parking spots at the Magic Kingdom. You arrive in the morning, if you've driven, you park your car, your kids are going nuts, you're like swatting them around and trying to get calmed down, which is impossible. Don't hit your sister. And so you get on the tram and they tell you like 10 times where you're parked, but somehow no one listens. And then you get to the park and you go in for the day. You have a great day. And you're back out there at 10, 11 at night, and the tram drops you off, or you're at the tram trying to figure out which one to get on. And in my experience, it's my wife turning to me saying, where are we parked? Because she doesn't remember, so obviously I do, which I didn't know was my responsibility, but that's lack of communication. So I say, I have no idea where we're parked. What are we going to do now? Just get on a tram and start wandering around the parking lot, which is, I don't know how many acres. Well, a while ago, way before my time, there were managers there and there were employees there that ran into this regularly. And it was before the old GPS find your car mode, if you all have that on your device. This was before all of that. And we had these problems a long time ago. And a long time ago, the manager said, look, we got to figure this out. And most companies would say, it's not our fault that guests can't remember where their car is. We told them 5 times. I mean, what do? Right? Put on a piece of paper, they'll probably lose that too. And the key to this is, it may not be your fault, but it's your problem. Because those people are there, and we're not just going to say, wait till everyone goes home in 3 hours, and then there'll be a few cars left, and one of those is yours. That's just not a really good plan. We're not going to get an excellence rating for those guests. So when the employees park the parking lot, they keep track. They'd been writing down the numbers, like, okay, what time did we finish that last row, to keep track, to report back how many cars were in the lot. And one of the employees said, well, tell you what, we know what row people are parked in, so we know what time they arrived. So if a guest can tell us within 15, 20 minutes of when they arrived, we can get them within a row or two, because we know what time we parked those rows. That's an example of innovation. No one would have thought of that. The managers wouldn't have thought of that. Guests wouldn't. But that employee that's out in that parking lot at night that has to answer these questions and put people in cars and figure this out, they came up with a solution because they had a need to do that. And so I'll test it out. Next time you go to the Magic Kingdom or any of the parks, get up the front and tell them your car's lost and see what happens. There's a really good chance they're going to ask you what time you parked. And if not, they've changed the process. But I'm not there anymore. Innovation. Once again, solved a big problem, really, really simple solution. Another one that I tested when I was at Magic Kingdom, we turned the Main Street Bakery into a Starbucks. And it was already popular, then it became really popular. And I love coffee. So every morning I'd be out walking in the Magic Kingdom, watching all the guests come in, and I'd see the family, and it was usually mom and the kids are ready to go. She's got the Excel spreadsheet of what time they need to be at all their destinations. And dad is like, all right, I can't complain because I'm supposed to be happy to be here and it's okay, but I need my coffee. And you get near Starbucks and the line's coming out the door, and he's walking by and he's like looking like, I'd like coffee. He's like, we do not have time for coffee. We need to be on Space Mountain, and then we have to be over at the mine train. And she gives him the list. So I was thinking to myself, okay, what about those people that just want a cup of black coffee, maybe a sugar or something? They don't want the double cappuccino espresso that you have to wait in line for. And so I talked to the team. I said, how can we do this? And they said, well, I guess we could do like a coffee express. Well, how would you do that? Well, we could brew the coffee, put it in thermoses, put it out front, have a round number. If people want to pay cash, we can slide the card, no specialty drinks. And we did that. And so now I got a bunch of dads who are now like, their experience at the Magic Kingdom went from okay to excellent because they got their coffee and didn't get in trouble with their spouse. That's innovation. So innovation is solving problems that you see, but you just have to learn how to see them. And I'll talk a little bit about that. How do you see what problems are going on and what solutions can be brought to those? So last night I was with Kyle at dinner. He works for Thought Exchange. Does everyone here use Thought Exchange? That software? Okay, so for those of you who don't, I found out about this 24 hours ago, and he explained it to me for 3 minutes. So I'm going to do my best to explain what this is. But this is a great tool. Thought Exchange is if you want to see what your parents in your district or your school, whatever population you want, you ask a question, you send it out to them, and they'll respond. And the software starts to give you groups of opinions. What do groups think? And where is the thinking of everyone? Is this really a problem, or do we just think it's a problem? Because I've been down that path many times at Disney. We spent a lot of time and money to fix something, and once we fixed it, the guest is like, we said, what do you think? They said, I didn't notice, So here's something we fixed. We fixed because we didn't talk to the guests first. Has anyone ever met Mickey Mouse? Mickey Mouse. Have you met Mickey Mouse? Okay. Has anyone ever met talking Mickey Mouse? Okay. So at the Magic Kingdom years ago, the technology had gotten so good, we said, you know what? We can have talking Mickey Mouse. And when he comes in, we're going to have this so he can have interact with kids and parents. And we spent a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of technology to do this. And after a few years, we did one of my research people in his early 20s, really young guy came. He said, Dan, you should see this. Now, first of all, he came to tell me I should see this instead of going up 5 levels to his vice president and having it go and come all the way back to me, because I told him, anything you find, you come talk to me because I run this place and I want to hear it. And he came to me and he said, hey, we have, I realized, did you know that the difference between non-talking Mickey and talking Mickey is like 2 percentage point excellence points, which is very small out of 100 points. It's almost negligible. And I said, really? I said, who else knows about this? He said, I guess, I don't know. If someone does, I don't know what they did about it. So we started to do some research because we were paying a whole bunch of money to have Mickey talk. And I won't get into it. We can just say we had to train him to talk. And we talked to guests and we said, so what do you think about talking Mickey? Like, what do you think about that experience? And a lot of guests, you know what they told us? I thought Mickey always talked. They didn't even notice, because when you meet Mickey, you're like, it's bigger than life. You don't realize the kids are there, his big ears, and he gives you a hug and everything. They didn't realize he never talked, because emotionally it was the same. And so we realized, you know what, we can fix this. We can actually do something different and deliver more resources, deliver more value, but we had to know about it. And this one guy tripped upon that. So I would just tell you, are you listening? Are you listening? And I know a lot of you have done a lot of listening the past 2 years on that other side of Zoom and have gotten, knocked around. Leadership, as I say, is a contact sport, and I know you've experienced that. But you got to keep listening. You got to keep asking. What is it that you'd like us to do better? You got to dig and dig and dig and have all kinds. We call them listening posts at Disney. All these listening posts. I used to have employees, cast members, who had been there for 35 years. And I'd go talk to them. Hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? It'd be a custodial guy who'd been there 35 years. Dan, I think that's the stupidest idea I ever heard. I'm like, all right, there's a data point. Let's go see if this really is important. Let's go talk to our guests. If we were going to do this, what do you think that would happen? I had a group of 300 guests who were on an NDA agreement. I could call any time and run an idea by them, and they could give me instant feedback on the idea, guests. I talked to college program employees. I would talk to our other executives. So I was always, a big part of my job was listening, because when you get into the roles you're in, guess what? People don't always tell you what they're thinking, because there's no upside to telling you about a problem or something negative, right? You need to invite that. And so you have to create a culture where you're constantly inviting that. You're inviting all that. And it'll suck the life out of you. Believe me, I know what it's like, because no one's happy. There's always something to fix. But I realized over time, if you're listening, you're going to know the truth. You're going to know what's going on. And a lot of us, it's like, if I don't know, then it's not happening, and I have to worry about it. But that's no way to lead. And so what are your listening posts? How are you getting data constantly coming in? And this tool, Thought Exchange, is it's very efficient, and it's a great quick way to get a read on what's going on. Now, it's data. But it's another way to look at it. The other way to get it is go into your schools. Go be a guest in there. Now, I used to go to the Magic Kingdom as a guest once a month. I put on my flip-flops, my shorts, my fake mustache, my sunglasses, and lurk around. And I didn't have the fake mustache, but I'd blend it in with the other 50,000 guests in the park. And I'd park my car, buy a ticket, go through the turnstiles, get on the monorail, go on an attraction, go to the merchandise location, go to the food and beverage location. And at the end of the day, I'd go home depressed. I'm like, we're terrible. We are terrible at what we do. And I had a list like 50 things we had to fix. And then I had, a list of good things. I took pictures of employees greeting and doing a really good job, and we would download it. I go, hey, I went and experienced this as a customer, and here's what we're doing to people. What do you all think about this? And as soon as I started doing that, And it wasn't in an accusing way. It wasn't telling James, why is this happening? It was, did you know this, and do you think we can fix it? And as soon as I started doing it, guess what they started doing? They started doing park visits twice a month, because it's better for them to find it and fix it before I go out and do that. And now their managers are thinking about what can we fix, and that whole role modeling thing. And now you're actually role modeling innovation. You're role modeling, you're spending the time. But the currency is time. And finding the time to do that is another thing. A lot of people say, like, I don't have one extra minute. But once again, if innovation and continuous improvement is important to you, you will figure out and find time to do it. And if it's not a priority, then you won't find time to do it. And you'll do other things. And I'm not judging to say that's good or bad. That's just where it is. Where you spend your time is what you think is important. What you talk about and focus on is what's important. So if you really do believe that innovation is important, this is another thing to do. Go see what's happening in the field. And with technology today, you have the ability to do that. But I know it's hard. I know it's hard because you open that door and it's like parents are frustrated. They're having problems and you're a target. And you're involved in their kids and they're worried about their kids. They want their kids to have the best experience, the best education, and this whole thing the past 2 years has impacted. You're on the tip of the spear to be responsible for that. But they're not talking to you, they're talking to the whole system. But once again, it's not your fault, but it's your problem. And so how do you address those things? Growth mindset, and I'm going to talk about a little about the emotional intelligence piece. I know many of you probably, or I would recommend the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. And growth mindset, it is such a great concept. Growth mindset, fixed mindset. Fixed mindset is, I can't learn more, I can't get better at what I'm doing, I don't want to take risks because I'll look like I'm a failure, I'm vulnerable, I don't want to look like that, so I'm just going to stay here, stay safe, be defensive, and make sure things are good. Then you have growth mindset. Trying to come up here and dance to AC/DC. That's not good. But boy, maybe someday I'll be able to dance a little better. Growth mindset is getting people to take risks. And growth mindset is getting them to overcome obstacles and think positively about it and take problems and not be run over by them, but learn how to deal with them. And I am a big believer you can teach that role modeling in the schools. You can teach this to students. And it may be one of the most important things to teach, because I know you have a lot of technical things you need to teach your students, but this ability to have this attitude to overcome obstacles, if you can teach students that, they are going to be successful the rest of their lives. Because that's basically every job in the world is solving problems. That's basically what you're doing. The technology, it's how do I make this ride more productive? How do I get this laser to be more accurate? The technology changes, but you're basically solving problems. And so if you can teach these students how to overcome and solve problems, they're going to be in a great place. If you can get them to have that courage and that confidence, and once again, you got to talk to them about that. And it's like bringing up these students today to get up here in front of an audience and dance and sing. That's growth, and that's a big deal. And they're going to remember that the rest of their lives. How do you get every student to have those moments they look back on and say, I can do it because I already did it once? I'm a big fan of giving more confidence than they deserve, right? Because they're going to go try things. And as long as it's not lethal, it's okay. It's okay to fail. I had a young lady came and visited me at the Magic Kingdom. She was a college program employee. And she applied to be a trainer, which is the next level up. And I had an open door policy. Anyone could call me and set up time to speak. So she came and saw me. We sat down and we talked about her college program and how it was going and where she went to school and what her goals were. And she started to tear up, well up. And I said, are you okay? What's going on? She said, well, I tried for this trainer role and I didn't get it. And then she broke out into full tears. And my assistant was really good. She came in with the tissues were ready, because this happens sometimes. And we were talking. I said, I'm sorry you're so upset about that. I said, what was it not fair? Was the process not fair? She said, no, it was fair, but I've never failed. And boy, when she said that, I kind of had that. I said, you know what? Welcome to the real world. This is great. She's like, what? And she's running around. I said, this is life. You went for that. No college program tries to be a trainer. You tried to be a trainer and didn't get it. You now have succeeded because you tried and you failed, and you're going to come back next time and do that again. But you better get used to failing if you really want to keep going forward, because you got to take these chances. And I know we've all heard this before, but it really is putting your students in uncomfortable situations, and not in a bad way, but in a way that's going to push them and make them better. And they're going to get the courage to realize they don't have that chain on their ankle and they can go do whatever they want. So a quick story. My wife and I we were in Brazil for 3 weeks. We got back like 3 nights ago. And we met a gentleman down there, and we went and talked to a bunch of companies, and they're really into growth and learning about leadership. And so we're going to be going down there more frequently. Small problem, we don't speak Portuguese. We're working on that, but we have interpreters. So anyway, I gave a speech at a conference, and there was about 3,000 people in the arena I spoke to. And the beginning of the speech, I wanted to demonstrate growth mindset. And so I said, in a moment, I'm going to ask for a volunteer. And like 2 people raised their hand. Like, okay, I'm going to bring you up on stage. This is probably going to be embarrassing. It may be a little risky, but I want to see who would like to volunteer. And out of 3,000 people, like 50 hands went up. And I picked the 2 first people. I picked one guy that raised his hand right away. And then I picked the first person after I asked the whole question who raised their hand. And it was very random, but I picked them. And they started to move up to the side to come on stage, and someone had a microphone. And I said, all right, hold on a second. I'm not going to ask you to come up on stage, but I want to know why you raised your hand. Why did you raise your hand after I told you I was going to bring you up? It might be embarrassing. It might be risky. And one gentleman said, well, I came to this conference to learn, and I'm up to try whatever's going on. I'm in. And I said, all right, that's growth mindset. And the other guy said about the same thing. I want to learn, and it seemed like I'm a risk taker. And I said, all right, well, I'm not going to bring you up, but what I'd like to do is if you all are available in the morning, I'd like you to come to the hotel we're staying in. I want to buy you breakfast. My wife and I want to buy you breakfast. And I want to talk to you about your careers and your companies and how we can help you. I said, so I told the crowd, I said, that is creating your own luck. That's growth mindset. It's raising your hand when you're not sure, and that paying off a day instantly, a day later, a week later, a year later, 5 years later. And so we did that. So after my speech, I went in the back and I was signing books. And after there was a few hundred people there, and I'm signing away, and one young lady came up, and she had Google Translate. She didn't speak English, but she had typed, and I read it. She said, hi, Dan. I raised my hand, but you didn't see me, and you didn't pick any women, and I want to come to breakfast tomorrow. And I looked at that, and I said, I said, okay. She said, okay. I said, yeah, sounds good. And I said, I typed, I'll send you the address of the hotel tomorrow. And she walked away like shell-shocked, like what? But I wanted to reward that. So out of I just talked to 3,000 people about creating opportunities. Her and one other lady did that. They both told me, I raised my hand and you didn't pick me, and I want to be at breakfast. I mean, how are you going to say no to that? And so they came to that. And one of the ladies actually, she said, what else can we do? I want more. How else can I learn more? And I'm like, all right, now you're getting very challenging. But I said, if you can get to Sinope, this other town we're going to be in 3 days, we're doing a workshop, and you can be our guest at that. And she got on a plane and flew there. She's like 22. And showed up at that, and she filled in her whole workbook. And then we went to dinner with a bunch of people that night, and she was there. I don't know how she ended up there. But she was like, I'm not taking no, and I'm going to be in the middle of things. And we're going to keep in touch with her, and we're going to help her along the way. So I think that's a big piece of how you, in my opinion, that you really have an opportunity to help role model and instill in your schools is getting kids to really realize the future is in their hands. You know, this idea of teaching is changing dramatically. It's changing the same way leadership's changing. You know, a lot of executives before, it was, I'm going to work for 30 years, I'm going to become a guru and an expert, and then I'm going to give out knowledge to my students. And now I talk to professors and I talk to executives, and they say, you know what? When I give a lecture, not only do I get questions I've never gotten before about the topic, but the students are fact-checking me during my lecture. And you know, they Google, what's a good question to ask about Roman mythology? You know, and they go to question 5 and ask that. So they don't even know the material, but they're still asking the question. So those days are over. And in leadership, the days are over of having all that knowledge and parsing it out. You know, I like to think that as we get older, if we're evolving, we have more emotional intelligence. We've had more experiences to go through. We've dealt with more situations, and we know how to navigate relationships. What kids have today is DQ, digital intelligence, and they're going to know much more about solving problems than we do because we haven't even been immersed to the things they're looking at. They're just seeing things from a whole different point of view. And so it's almost like a partnership. how do I help facilitate learning? How can I be a partner with these students to help them learn? The thing is, if they're anything like, we have 2 boys and a girl. If they're like our sons, there's no facilitation going on. They need someone behind them saying, if you don't study, you're in big trouble. But we like them to participate also. So how do you create that environment where you can start involving the students to participate? And I've talked to a lot of you already, and there's student councils, and there's all kinds of things you're doing to get students involved along the way. But I think the more you can focus on the purpose is educating them and preparing them for the future. And in my mind, I don't say prepare them for college, because I was on the board of Junior Achievement. A lot of the kids weren't going to college, but prepare them for the future. How to be entrepreneurs, how to go out and maybe go to college, and how to survive in the world, and how to think, and the importance of solving problems, and the importance of their attitude. And I think if you can give that to them, you're going to give them a great future. But here's the irony. It's up to you to deliver that to them, because the teacher, you're not in the classroom, and the teachers look at you and say, if you're in the classroom and you're asking me to do that, do you know how hard this is? And that's the leadership challenge. How can you be empathetic, but say, look, I'm going to be empathetic, but you need to step up. People want to be challenged. When I was out in the park walking around Magic Kingdom, it wasn't Dan's around, watch out, we're going to get in trouble. It was the beginning. And then after a while, it was Dan's out, let's show them how great we're doing. But if you show up, you engage, text, come up with these moments where you can text your teachers, text the schools, have these moments where they know you're paying attention. And I know you say, look, we're paying attention. We're thinking about them all the time. But it's kind of like my dad likes to say, my wife and I, we've been married 28 years. She knows I love her, but man, it's a lot better when I say it, right? I can say, I love you. Just assume that's the case for the next 5 years and we'll check in then. That doesn't work. You got to say it all the time and remind people what their purpose is. And make sure the teachers know you're holding a community together. I mean, talking last night with at my table, feeding kids, delivering meals. I mean, what y'all are doing is so important to society. But when you're in that classroom, just like when you're at Disney loading that attraction, you don't see the bigger picture. I'm here to create magic. How do I do that in this job? You need to give them a bigger picture. You're doing someone no one else is doing. You decide to take on that responsibility. And now it's up to you to have that inspirational, engaging message. And that's the thing about leadership. You got all the stuff on your shoulders you got to take care of, and you still have to make it look like it's light and the future is bright, and that you're going to give everyone inspiration as you move forward. And that's the challenge along the way. Innovation. How do you become innovative? So you all want to learn about innovation and go back and make your schools innovative, your districts innovative. The best way to be innovative is to learn how to be innovative. So you can't just walk out and go, let's go innovate. It is a process. It's like anything else. Like you can say, okay, I want to learn how to do glass blowing. Great, let's just go start. You just don't start. You have to learn, and you have to take time, and you have to train. So once again, if you want to be innovative, tomorrow you should go buy a book on innovation, or even better, Google innovation, and there's 500 million articles online about innovation. Go find who innovation speakers are. Go find about and learn about it. And the more you learn about it, the more you're going to figure out tactics and things that you can bring and approaches you can take. My dad was at Disney for 16 years and became a speaker and an author. And he tells people, he said, I'm a world-class expert in time management. And some people say, well, what makes you a world-class expert? He says, I know more than you. So that's what you need to do. You need to know more than everyone else about innovation. And if you can go introduce those concepts, and it's not prescribing, it's not getting compliance, introducing those concepts to your teachers and finding the best practices and bringing those together. Because there's some teacher in some classroom doing something really small that's making a difference. How do you pick that out and spread it? Like a virus. No, I'm kidding. But how do you get it out there and get the word out and let people decide to take that on? So once again, if you want to get better at time management, go read about it. If you want to get better at communication, go study it, practice it, learn about it. These things don't happen just because you want them to. And innovation's the same. Innovation isn't having that moment of eureka at 3 a.m. It's about developing a process to be able to do this. I used to schedule half a day once a month. There was a meeting with me. Like probably you, if you don't block your calendar, it gets filled up. And so once a month, I blocked a half a day that said meeting with Dan. And when I woke up in the morning, I'm like, yes, I have a meeting with myself today. And sometimes I went to Starbucks. Sometimes I went to the park. Sometimes I went to one of the resorts and hung out and just thought about how am I doing? How am I leading my life? How am I spending time with my family? How am I at work? What do I need to improve upon? Sometimes those half days would be with my team. We'd go off and to a park somewhere and sit down and go, okay, how are we all working together? Are we doing what we need to be doing? Do you all enjoy working here? What do we need to fix? Great process. Stop, start, continue. This is a great one. Tell all the principals in your schools, I want you all to tell me what I should stop doing, start doing, and continue doing. And send it to this person anonymously, and they'll give me the list. And you're going to find out what people think about, how you're leading them and what's going on. Even better, if you can get them in a room together, which I know is hard, maybe a virtual room, put them in a room, tell them to do that and prioritize, and then leave. And say, I'll be back when you text me. I used to do that twice a year with my team. That was a big process at Disney. Stop, start, continue. Hey guys, here are my priorities. Here's what I want to do. I want you all to write what we should stop, start, and continue doing, and I'll be back, and text me when you're ready. And at the beginning I said, text me in an hour. And then like an hour and a half later, they're not texting me. I'm like, maybe this was not a good idea. And then after a while, it becomes a habit, and people realize it. But at the beginning, there's safety in numbers. The group can come up with a consensus of the things that you can improve upon, the things you really should start doing, they'd like you, and the things you're doing well. And that's called feedback. But in order to do that, you have to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable is hard because you may not like what you hear, but if you hear it, you can fix it. And not knowing about it doesn't mean it's there. It just means you don't know about it. So I'd rather know about the problem than not, and then have the option, the choice to fix it. My team used to tell me, Dan, you don't make decisions. I'm like, well, I'm a vice president. Of course I do. No, you don't. They didn't say it that, but that's what I heard. They said, you're always open. Once you make a decision, the next day you go, hey, have you all thought about this? And they challenged me on that. And so I focused on myself and said, you know what, I can't leave things open-ended anymore. And the next week, I started to make decisions. And sometimes they said, I have one more comment. I said, no, I'm making a decision. You say nothing else. And they would say, bravo, well done. So once again, we all have blind spots. We're all doing something that needs to be improved upon. We shouldn't focus on that. We certainly should improve upon those things because that's key to our leadership. Last point, managing change. Because I know a lot of you are saying, Dan, this is all good and well, innovation, creativity, have round tables, go be a mystery student, go show up and see what's going on. This is all great, but you don't understand. You don't understand how complex this is. You don't understand the politics. You don't understand the rules we have in place. You don't understand the parents, the teachers, the pay. And like I said, we can make a laundry list of all the reasons we can't do this, but you got to accept for what it is. You got the environment you're in, and that's where you need to focus on. So when it comes to change, here's how I thought about it. Think about your population you're leading as a train. You got the engine, the middle cars, and the caboose. About 10% are in the caboose. They do not want to change. They are not going to change. They may go through passive resistance and tell you they're changing, but they're not changing. Then you have the engine. When you have a new idea, they jump on. They're the ones that raise their hand first and be like, yeah, I'll try it. Let's go for that. 10% there. Then you have 80% in the middle, and they're the fence sitters. They're sitting there looking at the caboose and looking at the engine. They're like, I kind of agree with both. I'm just going to see what happens. Let's see what way momentum the train goes. And if it starts going backwards, maybe we'll go to the caboose. If we get some momentum, maybe we'll go to the front, but we're waiting. Those are the people you need to hone in on. Forget the 10% at the back. They're never changing. And you either need to get rid of them, and you're saying, yeah, right, or you need to neutralize them. You need to do something, but don't focus on them. Focus on the engine, because the engine are the ones that are going to be they're going to be innovative, they're going to try new things, and they're going to get the excitement and the momentum, and they're slowly going to pull those agnostics over, and slowly you're going to get momentum, and people are going to move in that direction when they see that success. So that's what I'd tell you. We like to spend a lot of times on the people that are just never going anywhere, and if they're not going anywhere, don't waste the time on that. And like I said, at Disney, we're like, as my wife says, they have to go find their magic someplace else, but it's not here. And like I said, I know how hard it is sometimes, but neutralize that group. I'm going to leave you with two last quotes. And I talk about this kind of every session I do pretty much. So there's a group, Dire Straits, you've heard of, and they have a song called The Bug. And in The Bug, if you ever listen to it, it's got all these great lines in it. And one of the lines in the song is, some days you're the Louisville Slugger, and some days you're the Ball. And I love that, and I think about that often, because usually I think about it when I'm the Ball. I'm like, this is not a good day. How did I get into this? Nothing's going right. And I remember working at Disney. I'd be driving home some nights from Magic Kingdom. I was the Louisville Slugger that day. I'm listening to the radio. I'm like, I'm a pretty humble guy, but I'm pretty sure there's never been a better vice president in the history of the Walt Disney Company than me today. I was funny. I was prepared. I was decisive. It was a great day. 3 days later, I'm driving home saying, how am I going to tell my wife that I might have to apply for a job at Universal? Because I'm going to get fired because I was so stupid today. So this thing shifts back and forth really quickly, and that's what life's about. It's about some days getting knocked around and some days being on top of things, but a lot of things are going to be out of your control. And it's not having those situations arise. It's how you deal with them. And that's what a growth mindset is. And if you have that positivity, people are going to think you're naive. Everything's falling around us, and you're saying we're going to get through this. Are you crazy? Well, the other choice is we don't. So yeah, I guess I am crazy. Let's go ahead and make it happen. And that's what they're looking to you for. They're not looking for optimism that is unfounded, but you need to have that positive forward motion. So some days you're the Louisville Slugger, and some days you're the Ball. The other quote came from my grandfather. He was a class of 1942 at the Naval Academy. They graduated in 3 years and went to war. And he was on the Columbia, and he retired Rear Admiral. And he was just a very impressive person. And he left me a quote. And it was very simple. Do your best and then forgive yourself. And I have that on my desk. I think about that quote every day also. You do your best and you forgive yourself. Because you know what? Sometimes your best is failure. Sometimes your best is never going to be good enough. But you do your best. You go home, kiss your spouse, kiss your loved one, recuperate, get a good night's sleep, take a hot shower, and get up the next day. Forgive yourself for yesterday and go forward today. That's the only thing we can do, is just one step at a time. So once again, I think the future is bright in New York City schools. What I've seen in the past 24, 48 hours and talking to Phyllis and Lori, and I want to congratulate you for everything you're doing, and thanks for having me today, and best of luck as we move forward. Thank you.